Good leaders inspire confidence. Great leaders inspire trust. But trust isn't built in a day. It's built in the moments when people feel seen, heard, and valued. It's built when we don't just share the good news, but also the difficult truths. It's built when transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's a commitment. A better blueprint for transparency isn't about saying more. It's about meaning more. It's about creating a culture where honesty isn't an afterthought, but the foundation. Transparency builds trust, and trust is the currency of leadership, business, and human connection. Without it, everything else is fragile. Yet transparency is often misunderstood. Some see it as merely sharing information, while others view it as a risk, something that could expose weaknesses or create discomfort. And so many leaders, organizations, and even individuals choose to withhold, filter, or sugarcoat the truth. But here's the problem. When we lack transparency, we don't just withhold facts, we withhold trust. And when trust is gone, people disengage. Employees stop feeling invested. Customers stop believing in brands. Relationships break down. Think about the last time you were uncertain about a decision made by your company, a leader, or even a friend. Chances are the issue wasn't just the decision itself. It was the lack of clarity around it. In the absence of information, people fill in the blanks themselves. And most of the time, those blanks are filled with doubt, skepticism, or even fear. That's how misinformation spreads. That's how cultures become toxic. That's how people lose faith in the very systems designed to support them. The problem isn't that people can't handle the truth. The problem is that they don't trust the people delivering it. When leaders only share good news, they create an illusion of perfection. But perfection is not relatable. Perfection is not real. What people truly respect is honesty. They respect leaders who admit when they don't have all the answers, but are committed to finding them. They respect organizations that don't just celebrate success, but also own their failures. They respect those who understand that transparency is not about damage control, it's about relationship building. Transparency requires 3 key commitments: honesty, consistency, and courage. Honesty means telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. It means sharing not just the polished version of reality, but the whole picture. People don't expect perfection, but they do expect authenticity. They don't need every problem to be solved instantly, but they do need to know where they stand. Consistency is what turns transparency from a buzzword into a culture. Sporadic transparency is not transparency, it's strategy. When information is shared only when it's convenient, people begin to question the motives behind it. Real transparency is a habit, not an event. It's a daily practice of ensuring that clarity and openness are the standard, not the exception. And then there's courage. Because let's be honest, transparency isn't always easy. It means admitting mistakes. It means addressing uncomfortable truths. It means allowing vulnerability into spaces where it's often been avoided. But here's the thing. When leaders have the courage to be transparent, they create an environment where others feel safe to do the same. And that's when trust is built. That's when teams work better. That's when companies thrive. The organizations, teams, and leaders that embrace transparency don't just create better workplaces, they create movements. They create brands people believe in, workplaces where employees feel valued, and cultures where clarity replaces confusion. These are the environments where people don't just work, they commit. They don't just comply, they care. Imagine a world where transparency wasn't an afterthought but a given, where information wasn't hidden behind closed doors but shared with intention, where people didn't have to guess whether they could trust their leaders, their companies, or even their peers. That world isn't built through policies alone, it's built through people who choose to lead differently. So the real question is, are we willing to redefine transparency? Are we ready to stop hiding behind polished words and start building trust through genuine, meaningful openness? Because when we do, we don't just change the way we lead, we change the way people believe. And in the end, that's what leadership is really about. Thank you. A better blueprint for transparency is not just about providing information, it's about building trust. Trust is not given, it's earned, and the foundation of trust is honesty. When people feel informed, valued, and included, they engage more deeply. They commit rather than comply. They believe rather than doubt. The problem is that many leaders, organizations, and even individuals hesitate to embrace full transparency. There's a fear that sharing too much will make them vulnerable, expose weaknesses, or create discomfort. But the truth is, when we hold back important information, when we sugarcoat reality, or when we only share what's convenient, we don't protect ourselves, we distance ourselves from those we need to connect with most. Lack of transparency does more than just create confusion. It breeds mistrust. Think about a time when you were uncertain about a decision made by your workplace, your government, or even a friend. More often than not, the issue wasn't the decision itself, but the lack of clarity surrounding it. In the absence of transparency, people fill in the gaps with their own assumptions, and those assumptions are often shaped by doubt, fear, or skepticism. When leaders fail to provide clear, honest communication, they don't just leave people in the dark, they leave them feeling disconnected, unimportant, and unheard. And when that happens, engagement drops, morale weakens, and relationships suffer. True transparency is not about sharing everything with everyone at all times. It's about ensuring that people have the information they need to make informed decisions, feel secure, and stay aligned with a shared purpose. It's about acknowledging reality, even when it's difficult. People don't expect perfection from leaders, organizations, or institutions. They expect authenticity. They expect honesty, not just when things are going well, but especially when they aren't. When a company faces challenges, when a leader makes a mistake, when the future is uncertain, transparency isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to admit what is known, what isn't, and what is being done to move forward. Transparency isn't just an ethical choice, it's a strategic one. The most successful organizations, teams, and leaders understand that openness fosters stronger relationships. When employees trust their leaders, they work with more passion. When customers trust a company, they remain loyal. When people trust each other, collaboration thrives. But trust is fragile. It takes time to build and only moments to break. The moment people feel deceived, manipulated, or left out, trust erodes. And once it's gone, it's incredibly difficult to regain. A better blueprint for transparency requires three things: honesty, consistency, and courage. Honesty means being clear and truthful, even when the truth is uncomfortable. It means sharing information that people need, not just information that is convenient. It means rejecting spin, half-truths, and vague messaging in favor of clarity, directness, and sincerity. People don't want to guess what's going on, they want to be informed. Consistency is what makes transparency credible. Sporadic transparency is not transparency, it's manipulation. When openness is selective, people begin to question motives. Real transparency is a commitment, not a one-time effort. It means ensuring that clear communication is a daily habit, not just something that happens when an organization is under pressure or when it benefits leadership. It's about creating a culture where openness is expected, not the exception. Courage is perhaps the hardest part. Transparency requires vulnerability. It requires admitting when mistakes have been made, owning failures, and having difficult conversations. It's easier to hide behind polished messages and rehearse statements. But leaders who embrace transparency with courage create environments where people feel safe to be honest, to share concerns, and to contribute without fear. That's when real progress happens. That's when teams become stronger. That's when people feel connected. The organizations, leaders, and teams that embrace transparency don't just create better workplaces or stronger relationships, they create cultures of trust. They create environments where employees feel valued, customers feel respected, and teams work with purpose. They don't just operate with openness, they thrive because of it. Imagine a world where transparency wasn't a last-minute response, but a fundamental principle. A world where information wasn't controlled for convenience, but shared for the benefit of all. A world where people didn't have to wonder if they could trust their leaders, their organizations, or each other. That world isn't built by policies alone, it's built by people who choose to lead differently. So the question is, are we ready to stop hiding behind polished words and start leading with clarity, authenticity, and courage? Because when we do, we don't just improve communication, we transform the way people believe, engage, and trust. And in the end, that's what leadership is truly about. A better blueprint for transparency is not just about providing information, it's about fostering trust, building connections, and creating an environment where people feel valued and included. Trust is not something that happens automatically. It is cultivated through consistent honesty, openness, and integrity. Without transparency, trust erodes. And when trust is lost, so is engagement, commitment, and loyalty. Whether in leadership, business, or personal relationships, transparency is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is what allows people to believe in the institutions they work for, the leaders they follow, and the communities they are part of. When transparency is missing, doubt takes its place, and doubt leads to disengagement, skepticism, and division. The hesitation to be transparent often comes from fear. Fear of being judged, fear of showing vulnerability, or fear of the consequences of honesty. Many organizations and leaders believe that withholding information protects them, that keeping certain details hidden prevents panic, confusion, or backlash. But the reality is that the lack of transparency does not protect, it isolates. It does not strengthen, it weakens. When people feel excluded from information that affects them, they do not simply accept it. They begin to question everything. They wonder what else is being kept from them. They create their own narratives, and they fill in the gaps with speculation rather than facts. And most of the time, those assumptions are far worse than the truth itself. Think about the times you have been in a situation where you did not have enough information. Maybe it was a workplace decision that was made without clear communication. Maybe it was a change in direction that seemed abrupt and unexplained. Maybe it was a relationship where someone was withholding their true feelings. In each of those moments, the issue was not just the situation itself, it was the lack of clarity surrounding it. When people are left in the dark, they do not just feel uninformed, they feel unimportant. And when people feel unimportant, they disengage. They stop putting in effort, they stop feeling loyal, and they stop believing in the mission, the leader, or the relationship. Transparency is not about giving everyone every detail of every decision. It is about making sure that people have the information they need to feel secure, aligned, and included. It is about being open about what is known, acknowledging what is unknown, and communicating the steps being taken to bridge that gap. People do not expect perfection from leaders or organizations, but they do expect honesty. They do not need every problem to be solved instantly, but they do need to know where they stand. When organizations and leaders are upfront about challenges, setbacks, or uncertainty, they do not lose credibility, they gain it. Because people respect honesty. They respect those who are willing to tell the truth, even when it is difficult. They respect those who do not just share the good news, but also have the courage to address the tough realities. The best organizations, teams, and relationships thrive on transparency because they understand that trust is their most valuable asset. Companies that are transparent with their employees see higher engagement, better performance, and stronger loyalty. Leaders who are transparent with their teams build stronger relationships, inspire greater commitment, and create cultures of accountability. People who are transparent in their personal relationships build deeper connections, resolve conflicts more effectively, and foster greater understanding. Transparency is not just an ethical choice, it is a strategic one. But transparency is not a one-time action, it is a habit. It requires consistency. Being open only when it is convenient is not transparency, it is manipulation. If people only hear the truth when things are going well, they will question the authenticity of leadership when things get difficult. True transparency is a commitment to ongoing clarity, not just when it benefits an organization or leader, but as a foundational value that guides decision-making, communication, and relationships. Transparency also requires courage. It requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, and to confront uncomfortable truths. It is easier to avoid difficult conversations, to keep information tightly controlled, and to maintain an illusion of certainty. But real leadership means embracing uncertainty with honesty. It means recognizing that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. Leaders who practice transparency create environments where others feel safe to do the same, where employees feel empowered to ask questions, where teams feel comfortable voicing concerns, and where trust is not just an expectation, but a reality. The impact of transparency extends far beyond the workplace. It shapes cultures, drives movements, and transforms relationships. It is the difference between a disengaged workforce and a thriving one, between a skeptical customer base and a loyal one, between a fractured society and a united one. Transparency is the bridge between confusion and clarity, between distrust and belief, between isolation and connection. Imagine what would happen if transparency was not an afterthought, but a standard. If leaders, organizations, and individuals embraced openness not as a response to pressure, but as a proactive commitment, if people did not have to question whether they were being told the full story, but trusted that honesty was the default, that kind of world is possible, but it requires a shift in mindset. It requires a willingness to lead differently, to communicate openly, and to prioritize trust over control. So the question is, are we willing to redefine transparency? Are we ready to move beyond selective honesty and embrace a culture of true openness? Because when we do not just change the way we lead, we change the way people believe. And in the end, that is what real leadership is about. A better blueprint for transparency is not just a concept. It is a fundamental shift in the way we build trust, communicate, and lead. Transparency is not about flooding people with information or making every decision public. It is about creating clarity, fostering honesty, and ensuring that people feel valued, informed, and respected. When leaders, organizations, and individuals commit to transparency, they create an environment where trust is not just given, but actively cultivated. Without transparency, there is doubt. And doubt leads to disengagement, skepticism, and a breakdown in relationships. Whether in business, government, or personal interactions, transparency is the key to lasting trust. Many people resist transparency because they believe it exposes vulnerability. There is a fear that being open about challenges, setbacks, or uncertainties will make them look weak. But the reality is the opposite. When leaders are transparent, they gain credibility. When companies openly acknowledge their mistakes and their plans to correct them, they earn respect. When individuals communicate honestly about their intentions and feelings, they build deeper, more meaningful relationships. Transparency is not about appearing perfect. It is about being real. People don't expect perfection, but they do expect honesty. And when honesty is lacking, people begin to question everything. The danger of withholding information is that it creates room for speculation. When people are left in the dark, they do not simply accept it, they create their own explanations. They fill in the gaps with assumptions, and those assumptions are often far worse than the truth. A lack of transparency fuels doubt, and doubt erodes trust. Whether in the workplace or in society, when people feel like they are being misled, controlled, or excluded, they stop engaging. Employees lose motivation, customers lose loyalty, citizens lose faith in leadership, trust is fragile, and once broken, it is difficult to restore. Transparency is not just about preventing misunderstandings, it is about building stronger, more engaged communities. In business, companies that prioritize transparency see higher levels of employee satisfaction, stronger team collaboration, and greater customer loyalty. People want to work for organizations where they feel included, where they understand the mission, and where they know their contributions matter. Employees who are kept informed about company decisions, goals, and challenges are more invested in their work. They feel like they are part of something bigger rather than just working for a paycheck. Transparency fosters a culture of accountability and empowerment where people take ownership of their roles and responsibilities because they believe in the bigger picture. The same principle applies to leadership. Leaders who communicate openly and honestly inspire greater commitment from their teams. When leaders admit mistakes, share challenges, and involve others in problem solving, they do not lose authority, they gain respect. People follow leaders who are authentic, who are willing to be vulnerable, and who demonstrate integrity through their actions. Leadership is not about having all the answers, it is about having the courage to be honest about the journey. When leaders are transparent, they create an environment where people feel safe to speak up, to ask questions, and to contribute meaningfully. But transparency is not something that can be turned on and off at convenience. Selective transparency, where information is shared only when it benefits those in power, is not true transparency. It is manipulation. People can sense when they are only being told what someone wants them to hear. Real transparency is a continuous practice. It is a commitment to openness, even when it is uncomfortable. It means sharing not only successes, but also setbacks. It means communicating not only when things are going well, but also when times are uncertain. It means recognizing that honesty is not a weakness. It is the foundation of trust. The challenge with transparency is that it requires courage. It is not always easy to be open, especially when the truth is difficult. But the alternative Hiding behind vague messaging, half-truths, or silence only creates bigger problems. When people feel they cannot trust what they are being told, they disengage, they stop listening, they stop believing. That is why transparency is not just about telling the truth. It is about showing a commitment to honesty in all interactions. It is about proving through consistent actions that integrity matters. Beyond organizations and leadership, transparency has a profound impact on society. In a world where misinformation spreads rapidly, where people are bombarded with conflicting narratives, transparency is more critical than ever. It is the difference between a society built on trust and one built on suspicion. When institutions are open about their processes, when governments communicate honestly with their citizens, and when media outlets prioritize truth over sensationalism, people feel more connected, more informed, and more engaged. Trust in institutions is built through transparency, and when that trust exists, societies thrive. Imagine a world where transparency was not just an expectation, but a norm, where people did not have to question whether they were being told the full story, where organizations, leaders, and individuals embraced honesty as a fundamental value rather than a reaction to pressure. That world is possible, but it requires a commitment to change. It requires a shift from secrecy to openness, from control to collaboration, from fear to trust. The choice is ours. We can continue to operate in a way that protects information, that avoids difficult conversations, and that prioritizes short-term control over long-term trust. Or we can commit to a new way of thinking. We can choose to lead with transparency, to communicate with honesty, and to build relationships based on trust rather than uncertainty. Because when we do not just improve communication, we transform the way people engage, believe, and connect. And ultimately, that is what real leadership is about. Transparency is the foundation of trust, leadership, and meaningful connections. It requires honesty, consistency, and courage, not as a convenience, but as a commitment. When we choose transparency, we foster trust, strengthen relationships, and create environments where people feel valued and engaged. The choice is simple. We can hide behind uncertainty or lead with clarity. True leadership demands openness. The question is, are we ready to embrace it? So the real question is, are we ready to stop hiding behind polished words and start building trust through genuine transparency? Because when we do, we don't just create better workplaces or stronger relationships. We create a world where trust isn't the exception, it's the standard. Thank you.